Let me set the scene. I'm a 32-year-old guy living on a small hobby farm just outside a sleepy suburban town. The kind of place where people wave at you from their porches, but secretly judge your lawn height. I moved here 2 years ago to escape the city grind, trading spreadsheets for a pitchfork and Wi-Fi for a view of rolling fields. My little slice of paradise includes a creaky old barn, a vegetable garden, and a flock of 8 turkeys who think they're the kings of the property. I named them after Star Wars characters. Vader, the biggest, meanest one, runs the show. Life was peaceful until she showed up. Her name's Marcy, or, as I call her in my head, HOA Karen Supreme. Marcy's the head of our neighborhood's Homeowners Association, a group that somehow thinks they have jurisdiction over my 5 acres of land, despite my property line being just outside their precious gated community. Marcy's the kind of woman who carries a clipboard like it's a scepter and wears sunglasses so big they could double as a windshield. Her emails always start with "per HOA regulations" and end with a passive-aggressive smiley face. You know the type. It all started with a letter taped to my mailbox 3 months ago. I was trudging back from feeding the turkeys, my boots caked in mud, when I saw it. A crisp, white envelope with the HOA logo, looking wildly out of place next to my rusty mailbox. I opened it, expecting a neighborly welcome to the area note. Nope. It was a 500-word manifesto about how my barn's unsightly condition was lowering property values for the HOA folks half a mile away. Apparently, the barn's peeling red paint was a crime against humanity. The letter demanded I repaint it by the end of the month or face further action. I laughed, crumpled it up, and tossed it into the compost pile. Big mistake. A week later, I got another letter. This one had bullet points. Bullet points. It listed violations like my garden being too wild, it's a vegetable patch, not a jungle, and my turkeys being excessively noisy, they gobble. It's what turkeys do. The kicker? A $200 fine for noncompliance. I don't even live in their jurisdiction. I called the HOA office, expecting a reasonable conversation. Marcy answered. Her voice was like syrup laced with arsenic. "We're just looking out for the community's best interests," she purred, then hung up when I pointed out my land wasn't under their control. That's when I knew this wasn't going away. I decided to ignore her. I had tomatoes to harvest and a new coop to build for Vader and his crew. But Marcy wasn't done. Oh no, she escalated. I started noticing her white SUV creeping by my property line at odd hours, her sunglasses glinting as she scribbled notes on that cursed clipboard. Once, I caught her taking photos of my barn from the road. I waved, all friendly-like, and she sped off like I'd brandished a shotgun. Creepy, but I figured she'd get bored eventually. Spoiler, she didn't. The tension started ramping up last week. I was in town grabbing feed when my neighbor, Old Man Jenkins, pulled me aside at the hardware store. Jenkins is a grizzled farmer who's lived here since the Nixon administration. He's got a handshake like a vice and a permanent squint from years of staring at the sun. "Watch out for that Marcy," he grumbled, leaning on his cane. "She's been sniffing around, asking folks if your turkeys are disturbing the peace. Says she's got a lawyer friend who can make problems for you." I laughed it off, but Jenkins' warning stuck with me. Marcy wasn't just annoying, she was plotting. Then came the final straw. 2 days ago, I woke up to find my mailbox gone. Not broken, not tipped over, gone. Just a sad little hole in the ground where it used to be. I found it later that day, half a mile down the road, tossed in a ditch like a discarded soda can. Taped to it was another HOA letter, this one threatening escalated measures if I didn't comply with their demands. I was pissed, but I'm not an idiot. I installed a cheap security camera by the barn that night, figuring Marcy might try something else. I didn't expect her to go full mission impossible. Last night, around 2 a.m., my phone pinged with a motion alert from the camera. I rolled out of bed, bleary-eyed, and checked the feed. There she was, Marcy, in all her entitled glory, creeping toward my barn with a flashlight and a crowbar. Her sunglasses were perched on her head like a crown, even in the dead of night. My heart started pounding. This wasn't about paint anymore. This was war. I threw on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and headed out into the chilly night air. The turkeys were already gobbling like they sensed an intruder. Vader's deep, guttural call cut through the silence, and I could have sworn he was ready to throw down. I didn't know what Marcy was planning, but I wasn't about to let her mess with my property. The barn door was ajar when I got there, the padlock dangling uselessly. She'd pried it open. I peeked inside, and there she was, rifling through my tools, muttering about evidence and violations. That's when I got an idea. A glorious, petty, perfect idea. So there I was, 2 a.m., standing outside my barn in my muddy boots, flashlight in hand, watching Marcy, the HOA's self-appointed dictator, rummage through my tools like she was auditioning for a low-budget heist movie. Her flashlight beam danced across my workbench, illuminating my carefully organized, semi-organized, collection of wrenches, shovels, and a questionable jar of screws I've been meaning to sort since 2023. The turkeys were losing their minds, gobbling like they were ready to stage a coup. Vader, the 30-pound beast of a bird, was pacing in the corner of the barn where their pen sat, his beady eyes locked on Marcy like she was a walking affront to turkey kind. I crouched behind a stack of hay bales, my heart thumping like a bass drum. Marcy was muttering to herself, something about proof of violations, and that'll show him. Show who, Marcy? Me? The guy who just wants to grow carrots and keep his turkeys happy? Her crowbar glinted in the moonlight streaming through the barn's cracked window, and I realized this wasn't just a nosy Karen on a power trip. She was in my barn, on my property, in the middle of the night. This was breaking and entering, and I wasn't about to let her waltz out with my dignity or my tools. That's when the idea hit me like a rogue turkey wing to the face. The barn door was heavy, old, and had a sturdy bolt lock on the outside, a backup I'd installed after a raccoon incident last year. If I could slip out and lock it, Marcy would be trapped inside, with the turkeys. Now, I'm not a cruel man. I don't kick puppies or steal candy from kids. But the thought of Marcy, with her clipboard and her oversized sunglasses, stuck in there with Vader and his posse, that was poetic justice in its purest form. I crept backward, careful not to step on the creaky floorboard by the door. Marcy was too busy digging through a box of old paint cans to notice. I swear, she was probably looking for evidence that my barn's peeling paint was a federal crime. The turkeys, though, were onto her. Leia, the smallest but feistiest of the flock, let out a screech that could wake a coma patient. Marcy jumped, dropped her crowbar, and hissed, "Stupid birds." "Oh, Marcy, you just insulted the wrong poultry." I made it outside, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The barn door groaned as I eased it shut, and I slid the bolt into place with a satisfying clunk. For a second, I just stood there, listening. Silence. Then, a muffled "what the" from inside, followed by a louder gobble from Vader. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Step 1 of the turkey trap was complete. Now for step 2, call the cops. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, keeping my voice low. "Hi. Yeah, there's an intruder in my barn," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Broken with a crowbar, messing with my stuff. I've locked the door so they can't get out." The dispatcher, a woman with a no-nonsense tone, asked for my address and told me a patrol car was on the way. "Stay safe and don't engage," she said. Engage? Oh, I wasn't going to engage. I was going to let Vader handle this one. Back at the barn, things were getting lively. I checked the camera feed on my phone, and let me tell you, it was better than any reality TV show. Marcy was backed into a corner, clutching her clipboard like a shield while Vader and the gang advanced, feathers puffed up like they were auditioning for a bird gang. She was yelling something about filthy animals and "I'll sue," but the turkeys weren't impressed. Yoda, the sneaky one, darted in and pecked at her shoe, and Marcy let out a shriek that probably woke half the county. I had to cover my mouth to keep from cackling loud enough for her to hear. I figured I'd give her a few minutes to stew before the cops showed up. Not because I'm mean, okay, maybe a little mean, but because I wanted her to think twice before crossing my property line again. I sat on an old stump by the barn, sipping cold coffee from a thermos I'd grabbed on my way out. The stars were bright, the night was crisp, and the soundtrack of Marcy versus the turkeys was pure gold. Every so often, I'd hear a thud, Probably Marcy tripping over a feed bucket and a fresh round of gobbles. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I heard it. Tires crunching on gravel. Headlights cut through the darkness as a police cruiser pulled up my driveway. Two officers stepped out, a tall guy with a buzz cut and a shorter woman who looked like she'd seen it all. I waved them over, keeping my voice calm. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Intruders in the barn." Locked her in to keep her from running off. The woman officer raised an eyebrow. "Her?" she asked. I nodded. "You'll see." As we approached the barn, Marcy's voice was getting louder, a mix of indignation and panic. "This is outrageous. I'm a respected member of the community," she shouted, followed by a "Get away from me, you feathered demon." I glanced at the officers, who exchanged a look that said, "This is going to be good." I unbolted the door, ready to let them handle the rest, but not before taking one last peek at the chaos inside. Marcy's hair was a mess, her sunglasses were nowhere to be seen, and Vader was strutting like he'd just won a cage match. Worth it. The barn door swung open, and the scene inside was straight out of a fever dream. Marcy, HOA Karen Supreme, was pressed against the far wall, her pristine white blazer now sporting a suspicious smear of turkey feed. Her clipboard was on the floor, half buried under a pile of straw, and Vader, my 30-pound turkey enforcer, was staring her down like he was about to demand her lunch money. The other turkeys, Leia, Yoda, and the rest, were circling like a feathered SWAT team. Marcy's face was a mix of fury and fear, her hair looking like it had lost a fight with a leaf blower. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The cops, though, they weren't even trying to hide their smirks. The tall officer, who introduced himself as Officer Daniels, stepped into the barn, his flashlight cutting through the dim light. "Ma'am," he said, voice calm but firm, "you want to explain what you're doing in this man's barn at 2 in the morning?" The shorter officer, Officer Reyes, hung back, one hand on her radio, eyeing Marcy like she was sizing up a particularly unhinged raccoon. Marcy spun toward them, her voice hitting a pitch that could have shattered glass. "This is an outrage. I'm a respected member of the Homeowners Association. I was investigating violations." She jabbed a finger at me, standing just outside the door. "This man's barn is a blight on our community. And these creatures attacked me." Vader let out a low gobble, as if to say, "You started it, lady." I raised my hands, all innocent-like. "Officers, I caught her on my security camera breaking in with a crowbar. I locked the door to keep her from running off until you got here. Didn't want her stealing my prize-winning shovels." Okay, maybe the shovels weren't prize-winning, but I was enjoying the moment. Officer Reyes raised an eyebrow, clearly picking up on my vibe, but she didn't say anything. Daniels, meanwhile, was trying to herd Marcy out of the barn without getting pecked by Leia, who was still feeling spicy. Marcy wasn't going quietly. She launched into a tirade about property values, HOA regulations, and how my turkeys were a public nuisance. She even claimed she had permission to be on my property, which was news to me and, judging by the cops' faces, to them too. "Permission from who?" I asked, crossing my arms. "The Pope? The President? Or just your magical clipboard?" Marcy's eyes narrowed, but she didn't have an answer. "Point one for me." Daniels finally got her out of the barn, and I swear Vader gave her a parting glare that could have curdled milk. The cops asked for my side of the story, so I showed them the camera footage on my phone. There it was, in glorious black and white. Marcy prying open my barn door, sneaking inside, and rummaging like she was hunting for buried treasure. Reyes watched the video, her lips twitching. "That's definitely breaking and entering," she said, glancing at Marcy, who was now clutching her retrieved clipboard like it was her last shred of dignity. But Marcy wasn't done. Oh no. She doubled down, claiming she was conducting an official HOA inspection and that I'd assaulted her by locking her in with the turkeys. "Those birds are dangerous," she shrieked, pointing at a stray feather stuck to her sleeve. "I could have been killed. I couldn't help it," I snorted. "Ma'am, the only thing in danger was my feed bucket, and you knocked it over yourself." Daniels coughed, probably to cover a laugh, and told Marcy to calm down while they sorted things out. That's when Old Man Jenkins showed up, hobbling down my driveway with his cane, his ancient pickup truck parked crookedly behind the police cruiser. I'd texted him earlier, figuring a witness might help. Jenkins, bless his grumpy heart, didn't disappoint. "This woman's been harassing half the county," he barked, glaring at Marcy. "She tried to fine me for my tractor last month, said it was too loud." "It's a tractor, lady." Jenkins went on to tell the cops about Marcy's history of overstepping, fining people for unapproved flower beds, sending threatening letters to folks outside the HOA, even trying to get a neighbor's dog declared a menace because it barked at her SUV. The cops listened, their faces growing grimmer by the second. Marcy's confidence was starting to crack. She kept glancing at her clipboard, like it might summon a lawyer out of thin air. But the cops weren't buying her official business excuse, especially when I showed them the crumpled HOA letters from the past few months, including the one about my unsightly barn and the mystery fine for my turkey's noise. Reyes took photos of the letters, and Daniels asked Marcy for ID, which she handed over with a huff, muttering about small-town incompetence. As the cops talked to Marcy, I noticed something on the ground near the barn door, her crowbar, still lying where she'd dropped it. I pointed it out to Reyes, who bagged it as evidence. Marcy's face went pale, and for the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. The tension was thicker than the mud on my boots, and I could feel the scales tipping in my favor. But I knew Marcy wasn't the type to go down without a fight. She was probably already plotting her next move, and I had a feeling this wasn't over yet. With Marcy's crowbar bagged as evidence and old man Jenkins laying into her like a prosecutor on a mission, I thought I had the upper hand. The cops, officers Daniels and Reyes, were clearly leaning my way, their faces a mix of amusement and exasperation as Marcy clutched her clipboard like it was a life raft. The night air was crisp, the stars overhead mocking the chaos below, and my turkeys were still gobbling faintly from the barn, probably celebrating their victory over HOA Karen Supreme. But if I've learned anything from dealing with Marcy, it's that people like her don't go down easy. Oh no, she had one last card to play, and it was a doozy. Marcy straightened up, brushing straw off her blazer like she was about to walk into a boardroom. "Officers," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sweetness you'd find in a diet soda. "This is all a misunderstanding. I have documentation proving my authority to inspect this property." She reached into her purse, because of course she carried a purse during a 2 a.m. break-in, and pulled out a manila folder stuffed with papers. "The HOA has a covenant extending to adjacent properties," she declared, thrusting the folder at Daniels. "This man's barn is a clear violation, and I was acting within my rights." I snorted so loud I'm surprised the turkeys didn't start gobbling again. "Adjacent properties? Marcy, my land's not even in your HOA. You're making this up faster than a kid caught stealing cookies." But she shot me a look that could have peeled paint off my barn. Ironic, considering that's what started this mess. Daniels took the folder, flipping through it with a skeptical frown, while Reyes kept an eye on Marcy, who was now pacing like a caged animal. Jenkins muttered something about fancy lies, but I could see the cops hesitating. Paperwork, even fake paperwork, has a way of slowing things down. The folder was a masterclass in Karen nonsense. Photocopied maps with my property circled in red marker, a typed letter from some HOA legal advisor named Gerald who probably existed only in Marcy's imagination, and, get this, a petition signed by 3 people claiming my turkeys were disrupting the community's tranquility. 3 signatures. In a town of 2,000. I pointed this out to Daniels, who raised an eyebrow but kept reading. "This doesn't give you the right to break into private property," he said finally, handing the folder back. Marcy's face twitched, but she wasn't done. "Then explain this," she snapped, pulling out her phone and shoving it under Reyes' nose. It was a video, shaky but clear enough, showing my barn from the road, with the turkeys gobbling in the background. The timestamp was from a week ago, and Marcy's voice narrated, "This eyesore and these noisy animals are ruining our neighborhood." She looked at me triumphantly. "I've been documenting your violations for months. The HOA board will have you fined into oblivion." I was about to fire back when Jenkins stepped in, his cane thumping the ground. "Lady, you've been trespassing on my land to film that. Your SUV's been parking on my ditch for weeks." That got the cops' attention. "Trespassing on multiple properties?" Marcy's smug grin faltered, and I saw my opening. "Officers, check my camera footage again," I said, pulling up my phone. "She's been creeping around my place for weeks, taking photos, leaving threatening letters, even stealing my mailbox." I showed them the saved clips. Marcy's SUV idling by my gate. Marcy snapping pictures. Marcy's license plate clear as day. The evidence was piling up faster than turkey droppings in the barn. Reyes took my phone, scrolling through the footage with a nod. "This changes things," she said, glancing at Marcy, who was now sweating despite the chilly night. Daniels radioed for a supervisor, saying they needed to escalate this to the station. Marcy's eyes widened, and she started babbling about her rights and how she knew the mayor. Classic Karen move. Name drop someone important to dodge accountability. But the cops weren't biting. They told her to sit tight while they ran her ID and checked the HOA's supposed covenant. That's when my neighbor Sarah showed up, drawn by the flashing lights. Sarah's a librarian, quiet but sharp, with a knack for remembering every rule in the county handbook. She'd had her own run-ins with Marcy over a non-compliant mailbox. It was blue. Marcy hated blue. "I heard everything," Sarah said, wrapping her coat tighter against the cold. "Marcy's been bullying people outside the HOA for years. She tried to find me for my roses last summer. With Jenkins and Sarah backing me up, Marcy's story was crumbling faster than my barn's old roof. But Marcy wasn't out of tricks. She pulled Daniels aside, whispering furiously, probably thinking she could charm her way out. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught misunderstanding and community service. I leaned against the barn, sipping my now-cold coffee, watching her squirm. The turkeys were quieter now, probably exhausted from their starring role in Marcy's nightmare. I was starting to feel pretty good about how this was going, until Daniels walked back over, his face serious. "We're taking her to the station," he said, "but she's claiming you assaulted her by locking her in there." My stomach dropped. Assault? This was about to get messy. So there I was, standing by my barn at 3 a.m., my coffee long gone cold, with Marcy, HOA Karen Supreme, claiming I assaulted her by locking her in with my turkeys. The accusation hung in the air like the smell of wet straw after a rain. Officer Daniels' face was unreadable, but Officer Reyes was already rolling her eyes, probably used to Karen's pulling this kind of stunt. Old man Jenkins was muttering curses under his breath, and Sarah, the librarian with a vendetta against Marcy's mailbox obsession, looked ready to throw hands. The turkeys, bless their feathered hearts, were finally quiet, probably napping after their starring role in Marcy's personal horror show. But this was it, the final showdown. Marcy, clutching her manila folder like it was the Constitution, doubled down. "He trapped me in there with those vicious birds," she shrieked, pointing at me like I'd orchestrated a poultry hit squad. "That's assault. I'll sue him, the HOA, this whole town." Her voice cracked, and I swear I saw a turkey feather flutter out of her hair. Vader would have been proud. I kept my cool, though, leaning against the barn with a smirk. "Assault? Marcy, the only thing assaulted was my feed bucket when you tripped over it. I locked the door to stop a burglar." "That's you, by the way." Reyes, who was quickly becoming my favorite cop, stepped forward. "Ma'am, you broke into private property with a crowbar. We've got video evidence, a witness," she nodded at Jenkins, "and a pattern of harassment." She held up my phone, still showing clips of Marcy's SUV stalking my property for weeks. "You're lucky he didn't press charges the second you stole his mailbox." Marcy's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping on land. For once, her clipboard wasn't saving her. Daniels, meanwhile, had radioed the station and confirmed the HOA's covenant was as real as a unicorn. "No legal authority extends to this property," he said, handing Marcy's folder back like it was a failed homework assignment. "You're looking at trespassing and breaking and entering, minimum." Marcy's face went from red to ghostly white, and she started stammering about her lawyer friend Gerald. I couldn't resist. "Gerald from your imagination?" Or does he live in that folder with your fake petition? Jenkins snorted so loud it echoed. That's when Sarah, the quiet librarian with a spine of steel, dropped the hammer. Officers, check the county records, she said, pulling out her phone. Marcy's been pulling this stunt for years, finding people outside the HOA, forging documents, even trying to get eminent domain pushed on a neighbor's land for a community park that was really her cousin's real estate deal. Sarah had receipts, screenshots of emails, old HOA complaints, and a public record of Marcy's failed attempt to sue a guy for his unapproved fence. The cops' faces hardened. This wasn't just a Karen tantrum anymore. It was a pattern. Daniels cuffed Marcy, reading her rights as she sputtered about injustice and small-town conspiracies. Reyes turned to me. You want to press charges? She asked. I thought about it, watching Marcy get escorted to the cruiser, her sunglasses finally reappearing, crooked on her head. Yeah, I said. Breaking and entering, theft for the mailbox, and whatever else sticks. I just want my barn and my turkeys left alone. Reyes nodded, jotting it down. Smart move. We'll need you at the station tomorrow for a statement. As the cruiser pulled away, Marcy's glare burned through the window, but I just waved, nice and slow, like I was seeing off an old friend. Jenkins clapped me on the shoulder. You done good, kid. That woman's been a menace since she got that clipboard. Sarah grinned, promising to dig up more dirt on Marcy's HOA shenanigans. The whole town's gonna hear about this, she said, and I believed her. By morning, the local Facebook group was already buzzing with, "Did you hear about Marcy getting arrested?" posts. Small towns, man. The next day, I filed my statement at the station, bringing along the security footage and those crumpled HOA letters. The cops confirmed Marcy was facing charges for breaking and entering, vandalism for the mailbox, and possibly fraud if Sarah's records panned out. The HOA board, spooked by the scandal, issued a public apology, claiming Marcy acted alone. Sure, I didn't buy it, but it was a start. My barn was safe, my turkeys were strutting like they'd won the Super Bowl, and I was already planning to repaint the barn bright red, just to mess with the HOA's delicate sensibilities. Looking back, locking Marcy in with Vader and the gang wasn't just petty. It was the only way to stop her reign of terror. She thought she could bully me into submission, but she didn't count on my turkeys or my neighbors having my back. If she or her clipboard army ever try to come for my farm again, they'll find out I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. And maybe a new security camera. Or 10. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.